Why is it that everybody makes such a fuss over evolution? On the one hand, we have the religious who go from complete denial to making up all sorts of philosophical contortions in order to somehow accommodate it into their particular belief system. And on the other hand, we have the non-religious, the atheists and the non-anything, using it as the main reason for not believing, well, anything. It's as if the wheel has been reinvented as a square and everybody wants one on everything that moves. Why does everyone want to use something which doesn't fit, or which they probably don't understand? I have a feeling that if you are even the slightest bit religious, you would have to admit that you can't explain evolution, or give a short definition. Well, rather than getting into the problems of genes, mutation or natural selection, I always find these two pictures helpful. In just 30,000 years, humans have changed from the Stone Age caveman to the present day urban living computer bound people. That's two evolutions in one, social and biological. Given that the Earth is over 4.5 billion years old, that's only this amount of percentage over time. But explaining what evolution is only a fraction of the problem. The real problem lies in how evolution is used or misused by everyone to create a war of words. So the point of this video is to show how both sides have lost the plot and lost sight of what is really going on. On one side is the fact of evolution, and on the other the metaphor of the Genesis creation, and they both have something in common. They're both hiding something far more important than themselves. There are now over 7 billion people on this planet, and living space is severely limited. Creatures living in the wild or organisms unaffected by humans are becoming increasingly rare as natural habitat is destroyed on a daily basis. I think there will come a time in the not too distant future when the only animals that we will know will be in zoos. True evolution will then become a relic of history and be confined to how an animal can best survive by pacing up and down in a concrete prison. Perhaps sooner than we expect, the wolf will be living with the lamb, but not quite how the prophet Isaiah meant. But here is a definition of evolution to start us off, and natural selection, which is the internal engine which drives it all. Evolution is the change in the genetic composition of an organism over successive generations. Natural selection is a process whereby organisms better adapted to their environment tend to survive and produce more offspring. In other words, all living creatures change over time. If an organism doesn't adapt to its surroundings, it will die and will not pass on what it's learnt in its genetic makeup to the next generation. If you need more information on the technicalities of evolution, then Google Darwin's finches. So why is a scientific discovery considered by so many to be an enemy? Apparently because it gives a death blow to the basic belief system of the world's three main religions, Christianity, Judaism and Islam, where everything has been created by some form of supernatural being in a very short space of time. In a word, creation and evolution don't mix, even if you opt for the obvious solution of God created evolution. This has the basic problem of who created God. We then have the irony of it's turtles all the way down. If you're not familiar with this expression, then take some time to look it up. But evolution and creation don't appear to mix because we're just looking at things in the wrong way. Try putting on spiritual or enlightened spectacles instead of biological, scientific or religious ones. Everyone would agree, for example, that evolution is an extremely complex system which can look after itself once it's started. If we stop just there for a moment and apply that description to whatever kind of God you believe in, you will discover something rather strange. This is what I've just said about evolution, so correct me if I'm wrong, but this could almost be a description of a supernatural being. Well, at least a possible Christian Judeo God anyway. Why is that? Is this just a coincidence, or does it actually mean something? So let's look at 5 descriptions or definitions of evolution and work it to a logical conclusion. First, it probably started itself, but we will never know. We cannot go back 4.5 billion years. It is autonomous. In other words, it runs itself without any outside interference. It is hugely complex, and every part of that complexity matters, from microscopic cells of DNA up to the macroscopic environment, Earth and solar system. It's not visible over the average human lifespan. You would have to live, say, a couple of thousand years and stay in the same place, but then you would be observing natural selection as opposed to evolution on the grand scale. This is what happens when you take some lizards or birds from one island to another and watch how they adapt over, say, 30 or 40 years. And lastly, it cannot become extinct. This appears to be a strange description of evolution, but not so strange when you remember that there have been at least 5 mass extinctions since life began on Earth. One of these is called the Permian Triassic, where the extinction rate is calculated to be between 57% and 96% of all species. Remember that this was not only a destruction of life, but the destruction of the environment and habitat as well. So imagine a scenario where there is only 4% of life and 4% of the Earth left. And yet life was not extinguished, and evolution recovered as if nothing had happened. An absolute miracle from all points of view, whether you look at it scientifically, philosophically, or spiritually. So if evolution hides its creator, then you really have to ask why. Why would a creator want to wipe out virtually all life on Earth? Would you destroy something which had taken you a lifetime to make? No, of course you wouldn't. So we're now faced with the problem that nobody wants a supernatural being who appears to go ballistic whenever he feels like it and destroy everything he's made. Of course, this is a rather extreme view of what may have actually happened. So think of it like this. The inventor sits in his lab or workshop with his latest creation on the workbench in front of him. How is he going to find out if it works to 1 inch of its life? Unless he tests it to 1 inch of its life, or even destroys a prototype in the process. Would a builder or architect recommend a certain design of bridge unless he already knew it could withstand any weather or traffic thrown at it? And so from God's point of view, do you think he would create an Earth, a natural world, or an environment which couldn't withstand what humans would try to do to it? He, she or it must have known humans would eventually begin to destroy and pollute what he had given to them. The Bible actually says as much in this verse. So let's look at these again and see how they describe the very thing which we are trying to get rid of. It probably started itself. Well, God is probably infinite and has no beginning and no end. But we'll never know for sure, and probably wouldn't understand it if we did know. It is autonomous. He, she or it runs himself and has no need of any outside interference. It is hugely complex. Again, we don't know what this means, but I think that the Bible descriptions don't get anywhere near the reality. It isn't visible. He, she or it cannot be seen to exist or to be working. There are many clues, but no empirical evidence, as a scientist would say. Here is a definition of empirical evidence, if you're not sure what that means. And lastly, it cannot become extinct. This is probably the easiest to apply to a Judeo-Christian deity, as eternal and everlasting, go hand in hand with the standard definition of Yahweh. So maybe, just maybe, when we examine evolution, we could be standing on the pavement looking in at the shop window, and we cannot see that towering above us is a multi-storey skyscraper, of which the shop is only a part. It should be the same when you stare into space and see the light from a million stars and planets. There's no way you can see the million galaxies beyond, but you trust what the astronomers and astrophysicists say and believe that infinity is out there. But it's very easy to manufacture something to suit my own theory, and I can willingly accept that as a valid criticism, at this stage anyway. So what I need to do in part 2 is produce more evidence that the spiritual, religious and biblical are doing exactly the same thing as evolution and the natural world. They're hiding what is really going on.